Firstly, I would like to discuss in the first question law and policy regarding Shona, a 22-year-old female. Uh, First of all, there's no legislation in Scotland specifically related to people with autism. Uh, people, because of that, people with autism are not receiving support they need. Uh, According to research, 1 in 3 families has to resort to tribunal to receive support. There are international and domicile laws, policies um, that include people with autism, but they are not specifically for people with autism. For example, the European Convention of Human Rights, which states that human rights apply to us all regardless of differences such as sex, race, color, language, religion, uh, political or other opinion, nationality, social origin, association with national minority, property, birth, or other status. Additional law, uh, additional act that could apply in Shona's case is Social Work Scotland Act 1968. It introduced a duty on local authorities in Scotland to promote social welfare and provided the basic structure for contemporary social work in Scotland. Additional acts in Scotland is Adult Support and Protection Act 2007. The first part of this act is it introduced the provision for the protection of adults at risk of abuse, including inspection and investigation powers for local authorities and a range of interventions. Part 2 of the same act treats about it's called adults with capacity, Scotland Act 2000. Um, it simplifies the protection for adults with incapacity and improving access to them. According to Scottish government, lack of diagnosis should not prevent people with autism from getting support from various services, but unfortunately, diagnosis is often the key to receive a support. Even with diagnosis, it is difficult to get support because services do not fully recognize and meet people's needs. Um, Learning disability and mental health services are not set up for the needs of people with autism uh, so far, and may not accept people who have autism diagnosis. Uh, and gaps in provision exist in services, uh, especially in child and adolescents mental health services, school support, adult services, and support into employment. Uh, Many families and carers struggle to have their needs or for respite breaks and support met. Uh, in the past, there used to be different pieces of legislation that used to say that how social services should assess adults with disabilities. Uh, all these legislations have been replaced by the Care Act 2014. Um, this act it only applies to adults and carers in England. Uh, there are challenges with service delivery, not enough appropriate services for people with autism, uh, and practitioners' lack of appropriate training. Uh, One of the barriers that people like Shona with the diagnosis of mild autism experience is engaging with the world around her. Uh, People with mild autism like Shona have may have significant developmental and sensory challenges. They may have uh, problems in everyday activities, and problems with relationships. People with mild autism may also have problems with communication that may include difficulty with conversation, body language, eye contact, and facial expressions. Uh, they also have they may have difficulty in developing and maintaining relationships, making friends, and sharing interests. Uh, Quite often, people with diagnosis of mild autism uh, have preference for repeating the same actions, words, activities, movements, with without a reason, without a reason to do so. Uh, it happens that they focus on one interest. Um, Also, they experience they are overly sensitive to um sounds, lights, smells, touch. Um, they may get stressed in a supermarket, in public places, streets, hospitals, because they experience sensory overload. Um, since there's no official definition of mild autism, every person is different, and it every person will have different symptoms and will react differently in different circumstances. According to DSM-5, uh, people with mild autism may need relatively little support to live normal life. Uh, Although it also the DSM-5 states that there will be people that with the same diagnosis that may need a great deal of support depending on the situation. Shona with mild autism diagnosis may have difficulty in engaging with others. As mentioned in the scenario, she used to have problems with establishing friendships. Um, People with mild autism may have problems with communication, understanding empathy, taking another person's perspective. Due to these problems, people like Shona experience high rates of loneliness. Uh, this is probably why Shona's parents would prefer her to sustain current friendships and attend the same groups as her boyfriend, um, despite of the risks that I'll discuss a bit later. Um, people like Shona, because of problems with sustaining friendships, they may have they may feel rejected and they can experience social isolation, according to Chamberlain, 2000. Uh, Differences should be seen as an asset rather than problems to be solved. Uh, Differences quite often lead to discrimination. People with autism may face discrimination on a daily basis due to lack of awareness about autism and understanding how it may affect each autistic person differently, from some social care staff, other professionals, and society. The knowledge about autism is increasing in the last few years, but it's still it's not as well known. Um, the invisibility of autism as a condition, it is a problem. Quite often, in people with mild autism, there are no obvious physical signs, and sometimes a person with mild autism is treated as odd or badly behaved. Um, for Shona, additional problem additional barrier she's facing as a woman. Research suggests that women with autism are diagnosed much later than men, uh, which that could mean that she might not have received support uh, when she needed, as early as she needed. Um, Due to the vagueness of the scenario, I mean, there is a possibility that uh, Shona may not understand social cues. Um, she might not understand how healthy relationships should look like. Um, Research suggests that young people with autism, due to isolation in childhood, have no experience of building healthy friendships or relationships, and therefore they struggle with building relationships in adulthood. That that could explain the situation with Shona's boyfriend and um, her not being able to understand that certain behaviors are not appropriate. Additionally, despite of Shona's parents wanting her to be independent, they may be overprotective and controlling due to her disability. Shona may have problems with her financial decisions. According to research, people with learning disabilities find understanding relevant information regarding finances hard to process. They struggle with finances. Sometimes they overspend. Shona's capabilities and opportunities may be restricted by prejudice, discrimination, inaccessible, inaccessible environments, and inadequate support. Due to inadequate support, Shona's needs may be unmet. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one needs to have basic needs to be met before they can go to another level, such as belonging and building on self-esteem. Shona may have experienced social exclusion due to her differences. She may be disadvantaged when it comes to employment. Due to differences in behavior, Shona may experience exclusion from social groups where her behavior may be unwelcomed by people who do not understand autism. Shona may experience labeling due to her diagnosis of mild autism. Not only she might be labeled by people who do not understand autism and who focus on her differences rather than strengths, but also by services who do not consider diagnosis of mild autism severe enough to receive support. Uh, Question two. In addition to applying human rights and equality legislation, social workers should be aware of the needs of people with autism. Some may differ from the needs of other people. Some may be the same. For example, around difficulties in obtaining and retaining employment. According to research, obtaining employment, it's a and retaining employment, it's a biggest difficulty for bigger difficulty than for people without a diagnosis of autism. Some people with a diagnosis of mild autism may have unexpected difficulties taking into consideration an assessment of their overall daily living skills. For example, people may struggle with aspects of self-care while being very able to manage finances and all the way around. A needs assessment is the way social services find out what person needs and which areas they need support. A good needs assessment is fluid and done over several visits, and it's continuous. It is important to understand therapeutic and functionalist approaches to assessment rather than only behavioral when assessing a person on a spectrum. It is important to get to know Shona first, her likes and dislikes, to provide her right support. It is important to assess stress risk management and what should be considered to help Shona when she gets stressed. Mm, In Shona's case, it is crucial to ask her point of view on the situation with Tom, how she perceived their relationship. Additionally, what she thinks is her family point of view on her relationship with Tom. To assess Shona's needs and risk, first building a relationship is very important. Relationship should be built on trust between social worker and Shona. The place and time that will suit the person is important for meetings. Take into consideration sensory needs to avoid stress. Some people on the spectrum prefer to be given information in advance of the meeting on what is going to happen during the session. It's important to be punctual, inconsistent, and reliable. Preparation for the session is vital, and the content of assessment. It is also important to ask Shona before the meeting what puts her at ease, what to do and what not to do with regards to any anxieties she may have. It would be best to ask Shona where she wants to meet. To get the best outcomes, it is crucial to be honest. The approach to the assessment should be needs-led. Assessment should be also person-centered, tailored to Shona's needs without making assumptions what she might need. It is important to be empathetic and put oneself into her shoes. Not to focus on the deficit strength-based approach can be applied. Although the CARE Act states that assessor must consult someone with expertise in autism when the needs require it. Shona should be seen as a person first, not as a person with autism. Her wishes should be listened, although risks should be also taken into consideration, and Shona's mental capacity to, to make sensible decisions that will not end in her being in danger. First, it is important to ask what Shona wants, what are her goals, how she sees herself and her disability. It's important to keep in mind that some struggles can be connected to something else than autism. The law section 51 of the Adults with Incapacity Scotland Act 2000 specifies one must assume capacity for a person unless one can evidence the contrary via capacity assessment. The CARE Act 2014 stresses the duty to have suitably trained person conducting the assessment. People with autism may have other conditions as well as physical health issues. Assessment must ensure that any underlying support needs related to a person's autism are considered. It may be difficult to assess Shona depending on her self-awareness, ability to express her needs. She may not understand the question. She may have needs unrelated to her level of intellect. She might have been let down by services in the past, and she may not want to talk about her needs. Her parents might have mediated with outside world for her in the past, and she's not able to verbalize her needs. It would be appropriate to ask if Shona needs an advocate or close family with her during assessment. To assess Shona needs, the questions about her everyday life should be asked, such as is she preparing meals herself? Does she need prompting? How much help does she need with food preparation? Does she need help with personal care or toilet? Is she able to dress herself without assistance? Is she able to develop and maintain relationships with family and friends? Does she have difficulty in building relationships? If there's any difficulty, how does it make her feel? Is she able to access and engage in work, training, and education? Risk assessment is to prevent risk from happening. Research shows that people with learning disabilities are at risk of abuse from family, staff, friends, and strangers. According to Rachel Finson, 2007, there's a tension between adult protection and the desire to promote independence. All local authorities have procedures in place for protecting vulnerable adults from abuse. But it is a difficult process. Scotland has legislation that provides a framework to protect vulnerable adults from abuse. Um, it's a Protection from Abuse Scotland Act 2001. Shona might be persuaded to spend too much money on Tom, although Shona has right to make friendships and be in a relationship and make decisions on how she will spend her money. The risk could be addressed by working with Shona on her support, uh, working with Shona with her support workers if she has any, uh, by exploring her capacity to make her own decisions. This could be done by involving psychologists, maybe. Shona could be supported to make relationships. She could be encouraged to stop spending all her money on Tom and using in the worst case scenario using adult protection procedures if the risk has been identified. Question number 3. The approach in working with Shona uh, should be based on mutual trust between the social worker and Shona. It can only be achieved by building professional relationship with her. It is important not to assume anything about Shona. It would be good to plan first few meetings with her. She's an expert of her life. It might be challenging to access the information needed to understand her situation. She should know that she can refuse the support if she feels uncomfortable. In Shona's case, taking a holistic approach is crucial, giving her freedom to make choices, but keeping her safety in mind. So far, decision could have been made by Shona's parents. Therefore, PCS model could be useful to apply. There has to be a balance between self-determination and paternalism. Shona should have a right to make a decision related to her life as long as the risk is assessed. In Shona's case, the model that could be applied is social model of disability as opposed to individual model of disability. Social model focuses on barriers that are created by society for people with disabilities, and how such barriers prevent disabled people from becoming full members of the society. Individual model of disability focuses on person with disability and treats a person as in need of care and dependent on the state. Social model can help removing barriers by changing non-autistic people attitudes through positive language of autism. Uh, Another approach that could be used in Shona's case is obviously a person-centered approach, uh, which which could give her more control over her life. Uh, the support should start with Shona herself. Her wishes, hopes, and goals in life make her central to process of assessment and planning for services. Uh, another uh, approach could be role playing as an intervention, where skills are practiced by acting out social situations. And this approach has shown success when used as an exclusive treatment for improving social skills, according to Mason 2006. Group work could be used specifically for working on relationships. Um, one of the interventions is that it's usually used with children, autistic children, is social stories. It Some professionals are using it to work with adults. Stories use stories to explain social situations to people with autism and help them learn socially appropriate behavior and responses. These stories are sometimes called social scripts, social narratives, and story-based interventions. They are usually used with children on the spectrum, but can be used with adults too, as I mentioned before. By using simple explanations, social stories can explain the social phenomenon, clarify the cues, social cues, and also provide children with responses that would be appropriate for them and to use in a given social situation. It could be applied with Shona if she has problems with social cues and responses. When effective social stories teach the skills necessary to be successful in often confusing social situations for people with autism. Another approach, but it's quite successful with people with diagnosis of autism, is a strength-based approach. Autism affects people differently. Some individuals may need minimal support, while others can may need high level of care. It is important to recognize strengths and build on them. Therefore, social workers should operate within strength-based approaches, starting from the position that autistic adults have abilities. The focus should be on individual strengths, abilities, and no deficits. Social workers should therefore involve autistic adults in self-identification of their strengths. The above also involves supporting and empowering autistic people to maximize their ability to identify their life choices and preferences and to make decisions about all aspects of their lives. An important component of social work with autistic adults is therefore enabling and supporting self advocacy, as this helps people to identify their own needs, articulate their viewpoints, and challenge professionals, including their allocated social worker, when they want, uh, if they want to do that. It is important to understand forms of discrimination and disadvantages experienced by autistic adults. Social workers should use their professional knowledge, power, and legal status to advocate and challenge oppressive practices. Social workers should enable autistic adults to access independent specialist advocacy services stated in the CARE Act 2014, the Mental Capacity Act 2005, and the Mental Health Act 1983. Question 4. Uh, Skills that are important in social work, and especially in Shona's case, it's self-awareness. First of all, knowledge about own assumptions regarding disability. What is the point? My point of view uh, on disability. It can help to be aware of own assumptions and how they will affect the practice. A person who never had a disabled person in a family or between friends might have a different understanding of disability than the person who has been in contact with a disabled person. Social workers should um, understand different models of advocacy and attain the knowledge and skills and confidence to challenge professionals, especially in the area of autism where there's lots of misconceptions and old views. Uh, Also, it is important to promote advocacy as a starting point of the work with autistic adults and develop professional skills to advocate effectively on behalf of autistic adults. It is important to work in a partnership with individuals to understand how being autistic impacts upon them daily. It is important to have CPD and ensure that the knowledge about autism is up to date, and also about the co-occurring conditions. Uh, Social workers should focus on addressing people's needs through multi-agency assessment and self-identification of social and health needs, taking account of family and carers' views where appropriate, instead of pursuing diagnosis as an end goal. One of the most important skills is building relationships, as previously mentioned. To build a good relationship is to, especially with a person with mild autism diagnosis, is by preparation visits and minimizing an anxiety. It involves learning about the person as much as possible, making preparations for introductions, including considering the environment, and any sensory difficulties. Communication through text or text messages or email may support the beginnings of the relationship. Um, some autistic adults prefer interacting with professionals online because that minimizes outside stimuli, which can overload them sensorily. Showing interest in their hobby is a good idea. Uh, it is important to be open, honest, and transparent when building a trusting relationship. Displaying professionalism and use supervision and other resources of support. It is important to see regular feedback from the person we are working with. Uh, it is important for Shona. It would be important to avoid jargon, build clear, structured sentences, very direct sentences, avoiding sarcasm on um, meaning between the lines. Important to remember that people with autism struggle with eye contact. Pace is very important to check what is right for Shona. Being clear what is achievable without making uh, promises that may not happen. Uh, Important to remember that everybody have different communication styles, and usually it's better to avoid open questions. Shona might get confused with too many options. Body language is important as it might be misunderstood. Road mapping could be a great tool to see where the person see themselves at the moment, where they want to be in the future. It gives great results with people when working with people with autism. Patience and being comfortable with silence is very important when working with people with diagnosed with autism diagnosis. Need people Autistic people need time to process and process information and think uh, about the response much longer. Um, Very crucial is active listening. This is important because it might be frustrated to repeat the questions for a person with autism. Uh, Also, additional important thing is to not to overload person with information. Uh, it will be good to include person's network and ask their opinion, obviously with permission of the person in question. If Shauna wants to involve family and home support network in when asking for advice and opinion. Uh, and the fifth question. Discrimination Act 2005 clearly sets out the expectation that the people with disabilities should be included and not discriminated against in terms of access to services and facilities, employment, education, the Mental Capacity Act 2005 states that people with intellectual disabilities uh, should be assumed to have capacity for each individual decision. They have to make they have to make unless the strong evidence suggests otherwise. It's crucial for social workers to promote diversity and equality by upholding and promoting human dignity and well-being. Work towards promoting the best interests of the individual and groups in a society. People are different, and in this sense, that the population in general uh, and social work's clientele in particular are characterized by immense diversity. Where there is a difference, there is a potential for unfair discrimination. Anti-discriminatory practice should encompass all forms of discrimination that can be seen to lead to disadvantage, disparagement, and oppression. That is, we need to adopt a holistic approach to discrimination and related matters. Shona, because of her differences, may experience discrimination and disadvantage in the areas discussed previously. To support Shona, social workers should challenge stereotypes and labeling. Part of representation is to be able to see what Shona's priorities are, uh, and working with her in a present-centered way to understand what is crucial to her. It is important to be mindful about structural discrimination and support Shona to overcome such barriers. The knowledge of the services and referrals is crucial, plus building professional links. One needs to acknowledge different point of views and agendas when collaborating with other agencies on Shona's behalf. Challenging and confronting oppression has been described as the driving and force of anti-oppressive practice by Bullock and Harrison, 1998. Being able to challenge many things is important. Getting involved with local service development, using diplomacy to overcome discrimination. It is important to challenge out of date views. While representing Shona, it will be part of the role to diffuse and unpick some of the preconceptions and misunderstanding that others may have around autism. The conflict between Shona's wishes and her parents uh, may be apparent, as I mentioned previously. Shona should be in the center of her planning, but person-centered approach includes parents and carers' point of view too. It is important to explore Shona's parents' concerns and fears and ways to alleviate these, while recognizing that Shona's wishes must take priority. Anti-oppressive practice is crucial in Shona's case as it helps to implement social justice and challenge the structure of society. The notion of anti-oppressive practice is to improve the quality of life and well-being of Shona. Thank you.